Welcome to Fifth Dimensional Leadership. Man, it's been such a year and we're experimenting with some video this time. So very excited. And I have my co-host and collaborator, Jackson Best, here with me today. I'm so excited about that. And today we want to dig into something that is on everyone's minds, and that's the future of work. And Jackson and I have been thinking and talking a lot about this. We're living it in our daily lives. He's still at Google doing a whole lot of interesting stuff. I've left, but I'm doing a lot of interesting stuff that relates directly to this whole discussion around future of work. And we think there are 5 must-have topics that we want to address here and in a subsequent episode around leading through this pandemic and beyond. Because there is a beyond. I'm sure we're feeling like we've taken a step back, but we're going to get there. And I think that it's, in some ways, this has been the step back has forced us to do just that and rethink some of the things that we were thinking about, and maybe even reevaluate this notion that, there's a new normal and that we're just going to blow through it and move into something else. I think we need to be a lot more deliberate and fall back on some foundational things that weren't necessarily in place before we got into this mess. So with that, Jackson, welcome back. I'm so happy to see you, my dear.
Reunited, and it feels so good.
Was that Peaches and Herb?
Peaches and Herb. Whatever happened to them? Peaches and Herb. So good to see you. Thanks for the wonderful introduction. And I love that you're talking about, thinking about anchoring your audience, not only on the now, but the beyond, and that there will be a beyond.
There will be.
And I do think
it's of our making, right?
It's of our making. That's so right. We have, there's been few to no silver linings to all this, but that we have a rare and singular opportunity here to do, think, act differently as we move forward. And if this whole experience won't, shake us out of the ways we were working before, I don't know what will.
Well, we can bemoan it and resent it, or we can see it as an opportunity to move into a whole new phase of our civilization. I know I probably sound grandiose when I say that, but I actually believe this because this has been something that has impacted everyone in the world. Everyone. No one has been spared.
That's right.
And so I think and that's not by accident. So it's a call to all of our species to figure out what we're going to do differently. And I'll jump to something that I always talk about. We're going to be digging into consciousness, but I ask you to come back to this notion of consciousness, which is a unity consciousness. We're all one. And I think we need to kind of begin there and end there as we talk about some of the more granular elements of behaviors and mindsets that we need to adopt.
That's right. And I know we're going to get into that. And you're right. It might seem grand, but this is a grand moment and it requires grand leadership. So excited to talk to you today about these 5 must-haves as we move our organizations, our teams, as we lead organizations through and beyond the pandemic. First, though, Jenny, it's been a while since we've been together. I think a lot has changed for both of us.
Yeah.
I know listeners would love to hear where you've been, what you've been up to, and some of the changes that have gone on in your life since the last time we were together, probably 6 months ago, which now feels like a lifetime.
Yeah, I think it has been at least that. So first of all, you're checking out my natural hair color. I think that's been pretty common around a lot of people during the pandemic, but I'm owning it. I've been gray for decades and I'm really kind of getting into it. So it's a different look. And I moved back to Chicago about 2 months ago. I'm thrilled to be here. The vibe it suits me. Silicon Valley was interesting. I was glad to be out there for almost 5 years, but this is my adopted home, and I'm just thrilled to be back. It's just been amazing. And I'm doing consulting. Got a couple great clients. I just joined a lab. I won't name it yet, but I'm an entrepreneur in residence with a major corporation, and they have an investment in women-owned businesses that I'm supporting. And then I'm doing a ton of speaking. I'm with a speakers bureau, and They've been getting me some great engagements, some of which are live, which is really fun. And, we're kind of waiting to see how some of those are going to play out over the next couple of months. But the point is, I'm loving speaking to groups that you wouldn't normally think would want to be talking about this. You wouldn't assume. And it's been hugely gratifying. And frankly, it's helped me put a lot of my thinking on paper and to really solidify and kind of gauge. It's great to get a little bit of feedback from these audiences too, to know, is this resonating? Is this what they wanted to hear and to learn more about? So that's what I'm up to these days. And it's completely invigorating and glorious. And I just feel really fortunate to be able to be doing the stuff that I love.
Thriving, no surprise. I'm so
Thriving.
Back in Chi-Town, in your element, in your groove, and that you're bringing your wisdom, thought leadership, incredible experience, vision to multiple organizations. And no, you're doing great. Your name's circling back around to me. The great work that you're doing. So just so thrilled that things are going great.
And you have had some enormous changes in your life.
I have had some changes. We were close partners, allies, collaborators in the executive recruiting function at Google. And I decided to shake things up a bit career-wise and expand my HR portfolio. And I moved into a new function at Google called Market HR, which is in essence a geo matrix focus. We're sort of the matrix geo overlay or cross-functional partners to the business-focused HR colleagues. And so we're really bringing a site-based lens, a geo-focused lens as our business continues to expand through multiple territories. As we move our business towards a hybrid model, we've encouraged employees to transfer and now have employees across all 50 United States, of course, is around the globe. And so I've been leading market HR for New York, Cambridge, Boston, and San Francisco. A broad bicoastal remit, but I've been thrilled to be in that work. And a lot of this work around return to office plans, the future of work, all of that we've been at the tip of the spear of that as a team. So yeah, it's been busy and exciting work to be a part of. And as I continue to tell my colleagues, and I'm sure you feel the same, I think, again, few silver linings, but always try to anchor on the positive. Yeah. We're all going to be ready for whatever work has to throw at us on the other side of all this. That's all I can think is I just keep thinking about the critical experiences and stretch opportunities that we're all getting as we continue to navigate this challenging landscape together.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, you have been, as you say, at the tip of the spear. So you're living a lot of these changes. You're that person behind the scenes who's doing a lot of the thinking before that press release comes out. You've had to think about all the 500 considerations to making that happen or pulling that back in some cases. So I can only imagine how complicated that is. It
has been complex. And, I continue to say to colleagues and people outside of Google as well, we're not going to get this perfect. There is no way to get it perfect. This is truly uncharted territory for all of us. So good in many cases is going to have to be good enough. We're all doing the best we can and just encourage, as I know you always do, encourage your listeners to continue to give each other a lot of grace. People are still struggling, as we know.
Indeed.
Yeah. So Jenny, let's dive in. I'm really excited to talk about these 5 topics that we've been hashing out and chatting about and thinking about and evangelizing. And so let's get to the first one. And I think for me, Jenny, I'm excited to hear your thoughts. I know you've been on this beat way before the pandemic, but I think we both agree that sort of number one, first and foremost consideration through and coming out of the pandemic is going to be leading with mental health and consciousness first. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Ginny? Again, I know you've been on this beat of consciousness way before the rest of us. Would love to just hear from you.
Yeah, well, I'm always quite transparent about some of my spiritual beliefs. Having said that, I never want to impose them on anybody else. there's a practical element here that I'm talking about, regardless of your belief system. And that is that your mental health and that of the people under your charge, dare I say, right, your colleagues, has to be taken into consideration, because we know, I read a statistic recently that said that 30% of US adults have anxiety. Now, the degree to which that becomes a problem, I don't know, but that's a big number to start. And we've been hearing that mental health issues are increasing. I can bet, you don't have to acknowledge, but I can bet that at Google and most companies, you're sitting in HR and you're hearing about it. I witnessed it firsthand when I was still there at the beginning of the pandemic. And I'm not just talking about, people who need medication or hospitalization, something that extreme. I am talking about a lot of folks, and I know people in my own family who have struggled with anxiety, depression, people have been isolated. And part of what I'm wanting people to be concerned about, and particularly we're really trying to address leaders here, right? A lot of leaders are suffering from these same things too. And I don't know that we allow that to happen. And a lot of these leaders probably feel as though they can't let that be shown, or that would make them look weak. And that is more concerning to me than whatever might be plaguing them, the fact that they might want to tap it down. I think this is the time when leaders need to express their vulnerability. I mean, you don't have to get but so personal, but part of what I'm trying to get to is, and the direct linkage to what we're talking about, leadership that's required now, is that if you're not healthy, if I'm not healthy, let me use myself as an example, then how can I really do a good job of assessing you, Jackson, if you were reporting to me, right? How can I be mindful of what's going on with you if I'm not really in touch with myself? That level of self-awareness to me is that precursor to a deeper level of intuition and eventually consciousness. Mm-hmm. And that's the consciousness that I'm referring to. We can get into the metaphysical aspects of it, but for now, I'm really just talking about how aware of myself am I? Yeah. Am I being honest with myself, right? One of the 5 dimensions is speak your truth and know yourself. 2 of the 5 dimensions for this particular show, right? And so that's where we kind of need to start to get rejiggered on that, because we have all been traumatized. PTSD is rampant.
That's right.
It's real. And so we need to do a serious reset, and just, getting a massage or taking a long bath isn't going to do it. That's self-care. But I'm talking about reactivating a level of self-love and awareness of self that is going to allow you to get whatever help you need and to get regrounded and to become whole again, so that you can be in a position to lead in a clear-minded, empathetic, compassionate way.
Yeah. And, we're seeing leaders now really modeling these behaviors, in my view. I think you and I had chatted a bit about Naomi Osaka, for instance. Mm-hmm. Who openly acknowledged her mental health challenges, thinking about Simone Biles, others who are really, using their power and position as a platform for being open, honest, and candid about these challenges, and, for leading. That is leadership.
That is leadership.
That's what it looks like.
They have a platform, and therefore they are doing whether you want to call it thought leadership, but they're presenting. People look up to them, and that in and of itself can be burdensome for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've talked often about how much companies anchor on IQ or intellect or smarts, or even educational pedigree that's meant to betoken any of those things. But we both know it doesn't necessarily. It's not necessarily so. And so I think, to your point, this ability to this tap into consciousness, and this ability to be healthy and whole, such that you can support, lift, and ultimately create a healthy, productive workplace for employees is so critical, and something that we need to be assessing for too, quite frankly. Not saying we should, that we should necessarily be assessing for mental health, but that folks are attuned to, sensitive to, thoughtful about these issues, inclusive around these topics, and, to your point, are conscious and are acting consciously.
And I'm reminded of how many people, and I'm going to say this, particularly, I'm generalizing here, but particularly in tech, right? A lot of the people that I met, a lot of A students, a lot of people who were told, and I was told from my generation, my parents' generation, get a great education, get a great job, and stay there and make money and stay there. And I'm bringing that up because I think a lot of people are operating from a belief system that hasn't allowed them even to tap into aspects of who they are and what they want. And they've been operating out of a sense of obligation to family, to others, to culture, all these things that really inhibit them from even knowing what they want and feeling entitled to having what they want.
Yeah.
And that to me is just death by a thousand cuts. I mean, to tap all that down, all of that spirit in you, that's frankly, I think that's one of the contributors to the anxiety and the angst is people don't even realize they have a choice.
Yeah.
So that I just wanted to bring that up because to me, that's like foundational to how somebody can begin to expand their own awareness and their consciousness. And I do readings from time to time with different mystics. Okay, I'll admit that. And I had one recently where the woman said to me, the programming that you had and have, and this is true for everyone, it wasn't specific to me, although that's who she was talking to, the programming that you have to survive is different from the programming you have to thrive. And so I think as a civilization, once again, we have been operating from this mindset of survival through the pandemic, not to mention decades and eons before, right? When the humans were in caves and saber-toothed tigers, where that was survival. And now we've redefined what survival looks like. But I don't know that we've really defined what it means for us to thrive. And so I think we need to, that's part of why I wanted to talk about this, because we have to do some reprogramming at a very personal level that really can't be prescribed. We each have to figure out and redo a complete inventory of what our own beliefs have been and what some of the messages and expectations that have been placed on us have been, so that we can begin to tap into what's commonly known as EQ, right? Or eventually, as I'm talking about, this consciousness that is going to allow us to have this awareness to lead better and differently, more consciously, deliberately, empathetically, compassionately.
Absolutely. And to what, it's so spot on, surviving versus thriving. Yeah. Science tells us that prolonged fear, which we've all been in, right? We've basically been living in a boiled frog experiment for the past 18 months. For some global colleagues and friends, 2+ years. Science tells us that prolonged fear actually shrinks the hippocampus, which is the part of the brain that's responsible for memory. And we now believe innovation, right? Because innovation is in essence reconstituting things learned, memory. If you believe in a Jungian past, all of those pieces. Yeah. And so it's incumbent upon leaders to alleviate that fear in whatever way they can, and to clear, not create or exacerbate those mental and emotional roadblocks. And that means leading. That means being decisive, which we'll get into in a bit.
Yes, indeed.
Being clear, which we'll also talk more about in a bit. It means being consistent. And it means acting with the interests of your people first and foremost. I mean, imagine the potential long-term impacts to businesses and to our employees of having operated in this fear-based environment. And again, it is incumbent upon leadership, to your point, to move folks from surviving to thriving.
Yeah. And it's a tall order. And this isn't a quick fix. This isn't we want to change our culture and we're going to start this new program and, we're going to throw some money at whatever. This is a real shift and it's personal. It starts at a very personal level.
Yeah.
Can I read something? I found something that I want to share here that I've shared in some talks that I've done. And it's a quote from Steve Jobs that I had never heard. And it goes like this. He says, "I began to realize that an intuitive understanding and consciousness was more significant than abstract thinking and intellectual logical analysis. Intuition is a very powerful thing, more powerful than intellect, in my opinion." I agree with that.
Absolutely.
And I also have said several times that I think of him as having transcended his cognitive brilliance into a place of consciousness such that he could access all of the genius that he accessed. It transcends your brain, your mind, right? And so much of us invest so much in how we think and how smart we are. I'm talking about something that transcends intellect.
Well, and I say this, love for Google, it shows up in the product, right? The intuitive, thoughtful approach to human factors that's embedded in all that product is the physical, the business manifestation of that consciousness and that attunement. That's so true. I know, Jenny, you and I could talk about consciousness all day, and I know this is at the core of your thought leadership. But why don't we pivot to our second must-have, which I also know is near and dear to your heart, having worked with you as a leader, having had the honor of being on your team, and that is being decisive. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I guess I've seen so much indecision and I felt like it was really important to talk about this. And maybe I will kind of talk in terms of how I think, for what it's worth, right? And then what I've seen that I feel like kind of gets in the way. I've learned, and I didn't have this language for myself until maybe 15 years ago, so halfway through my career, that I'm a systems thinker. And I realized that, and you can appreciate this because I know how you think and you are the same, but I go back to our early educational training, yours in music, mine studying language, right? Linguistics and French as an undergraduate, and then moving into business and studying finance and accounting. And I realized that those are systems. And the way that I thought when I became an executive recruiter was to appreciate the methodology in the system, how the process works, but at the same time, always being able to look more than just 360, right? I think of this complete sphere that's multidimensional where you become attuned. And I think meditation and some of these other consciousness expansion kinds of activities allow you to think beyond how you might think. And oh, by the way, you tap into your intuition, which can inform your sense. And we tend to not, we get into the data and the facts are this and the facts are that. And yet you have this gut instinct that says, don't do it. And you do it anyway at your own peril. So I think I know for the way I think, and I think the way you think, we're pretty confident decision makers because we have trained ourselves, one, to own it, right? To realize that as a leader, I got to make the call. And I fear that a lot of organizations, and maybe it's a function of a younger generation coming up that wants to have a voice. I'm all about people having voices, but at some point you got to make the call, and deciding not to decide is not making a decision. And and you and I have seen people who, and I'm gonna call this out because this seems to be a very prevalent behavior that can be masked as being nice, as being kind, as being supportive. And it actually is conflict aversion, which is that undercuts decision making. People pleasing is another one that tends to go along with that. So you don't, what can happen, and I'm going off in a different direction, you'll pull me back, but what I see happening is one of the outcomes is if I'm conflict averse, then Jackson, I'm not going to want to tell you that I didn't think you did that well in that last presentation. I'm not going to tell you that because I want people to like me. And so I'm not going to say it.
Yeah.
That's unfair to you, especially if I'm your leader, if I'm your manager, that's straight up wrong. So back to the decision-making thing, I think we've got to get leaders more comfortable, and this links right back to what we were talking about in terms of their mental health and their past programming and their past beliefs. As a leader, you can't afford to be conflict averse. That's part of your job, is to resolve conflicts.
Yeah.
Easier said than done.
Absolutely. I'll say, and this might be a bridge too far, but I'll go one step further to what you've shared. This for me starts to run over into integrity, which I think we're going to talk about later in the episode in some ways, because consensus, or to your point, or to the other things you shared, not being direct, not being clear, using niceness or culture as a cudgel, those things ultimately become fig leaves for dodging accountability. Folks, that's not leadership. That's the opposite of leadership. Right. So I won't derail us here. I'm all for, bringing people along on the journey where people have disagreements, settling those disagreements in a thoughtful, collaborative, and inclusive way. But at the end of the day, the illusion of consensus is just that. It's an illusion.
It is.
Someone somewhere, as you said, in every organization is calling the ball. And it has to be that way, period. Someone somewhere has to make the call. And I would add one other thing to what you shared around being decisive. There are obvious impacts to indecision in an organization, which we all know, and they've been long established: losing your competitive edge, missing big deals, missing big trends. But I think what the pandemic has thrown into sharp relief for all of us is how much indecision impacts employee satisfaction and ultimately retention. And especially the satisfaction and retention of those employees who identify as members of an historically underrepresented group or historically represented groups. We're human. We all crave stability and certainty and homeostasis. That's the animal in us. What we know is that many employees who identify as Black plus, Latinx, trans plus, gay, underrepresented, we know that many of these employees often feel that their seat at the table is already tenuous at best, and that many of these employees are prone to feeling like their career prospects in most organizations are uncertain and subject to the whims of the hegemony, that might not always have their best interests at heart. Let's just be clear and honest.
Sure.
And when you have employees that already sense or feel a foundational uncertainty, and you add in all this contextual uncertainty with the pandemic, employees, and especially underrepresented employees, are going to seek out certainty wherever they can find it. And so that means if your organization isn't providing that certainty, they're going to seek out organizations and work environments where they will have that, where there is stability, where there is clarity, where they know and understand what their options are, and they have agency and control over those options. So
let's link a couple things right there, because what's coming to mind is the Great Resignation, right? That we keep hearing about.
Exactly.
And I think what has happened for a lot of these people who are now finding their power, they are evolving their consciousness to know what they want. They have become more discerning.
That's right.
Yay, this is great. I mean, seriously, this is important for them to say, you know what? I'm setting boundaries for myself. I'm not going to take that. I'm not going to work under those conditions. I'm not going to live here.
Yep.
I'm not going to work for somebody who's going to force me to go into the office all the time when I found a rhythm that works for me and my family and my mental health to be able to be even more productive in this way that I'm defining for myself.
That's right.
And so I love that that's happening. I actually do. It's concerning that people are, that organizations are having shortages of talent, but they're going to have to step up and figure that out. People are out here. There are bodies out here. They just need to learn how to attract them, right?
That's right.
So to your point, though, the decision needs to be made inside of these organizations. Who are you going to be to attract this talent that is now setting different expectations for how they want to operate? And how are you going to adopt or modify the way that you hire to identify best talent, regardless of where they live? I think it opens the door for what I've always talked about, because to me, best talent means you find people from all over the world, right? And that cuts through all of these other biases and all this other stuff that have been limiting.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the doors have been thrown wide open on where, when, how talent is located and works, and this is really, to your point, again, a rare and singular opportunity for businesses to fold in innovative voices from locations and places with experiences that have heretofore not necessarily been part of certain companies and corporations and institutions. And so it's just a real, to your point, it's just a really singular moment. And companies have to meet that moment, right? Leaders have to, again, make those decisions, create clarity, because if you don't, someone else is. And that's where the best talent is going to go, is where there's clarity and certainty.
That's right. And I would hasten to add, the certainty, probably that term probably feels uncomfortable for some leaders because we are in such uncertain times. I mean, Who isn't kind of watching what's happening with COVID cases on a daily basis and what parts of the world are shutting down versus opening up? Of course, I get that. But you still have to make the call.
Yeah.
Right? That the leader has to make that call from a systems, right? Taking in everything that you know, and then using some of your own instincts, tapping into that greater consciousness for guidance at times to say, this is the direction I'm going. My parents used to say, listen, you didn't come with a manual. So we didn't always get it right, and we won't.
Yeah.
And we're okay with that.
Yeah.
But we're going to own our decisions, and we will apologize to you if there was something that we told you that didn't seem to resonate, didn't work out right. Yeah. And I think leaders have to have that same mindset. It's like, stop thinking that you have to have all the answers.
Yeah.
You don't. But you need to be able to communicate in a way that suggests that there's a level of confidence that you have and a basis upon which you made this decision with these other people in mind, oh, by the way, not just to serve your needs.
Yeah. Well, what you're describing, is yes to everything you said. What you're tapping into is, yes, there's going to be, we are in a very uncertain time, and there will be uncertainty in the business. In my view, I'll only speak for myself. That's what keeps me coming back. Right? Like for as I said, we're animals, we crave homeostasis, but there is a tension, right? While we crave homeostasis, we also are continually
challenged.
They're intellectually curious, want to be challenged, want to grow. And so it's that human factors element, at least for me, that keeps it interesting, keeps me coming back for more, for no other reason to have a great story when I'm old. But, well, I'm already there. Sometime to have a great story. When we write our book, Jenny, for that.
Okay.
So I think what I'm saying, though, is in all this uncertainty, you and I both know that there are leaders and businesses where there was unnecessary uncertainty that existed in the business before the pandemic, right?
Oh, yeah.
Let's just take some tactical stuff, right? As HR professionals, messy, unclear jobs, trying to hire people to do two jobs for the price of one, unclear pass forward in the organization from a promotion and development standpoint, messy internal tools and systems. That's the stuff that in all of this chaos that we can't control, people are looking for environments where what can be controlled is controlled and solved.
That's right. Well
because
said.
all of that just, those are the foundational things, right? And as we know, if a house's foundation is cracked, it can't withstand the storm. And so this is what I'm saying to your leaders and listeners. If your house is not in order, now's the time to do it, because you're not going to weather the storm. The storm is going to keep rolling, and there are going to be houses that won't stand as a result.
Yeah.
And I just, it's never too soon to get someone in there and fix those cracks in your foundation. And
again, those cracks, and we laughed about this once before. We're HR professionals, which never sounds right, but we are. You especially are now. You have that in your title.
I know. Gosh, I'm thrilled. I shouldn't have made that face. I'm delighted. I'm doing what I'm doing.
Well, but to me, the whole notion of future of work, I'm not a technologist, so I can't talk about how technology is going to impact that. I can't. But I can talk about people and talent and people's systems, processes that need to be put into place to ensure a certain level of consistency, right? And a certain level of, you said the word earlier, but I think it's relevant here, integrity, right? There's got to be some of these, people talk about culture. Well, culture is nothing more than an amalgam of the behaviors of the senior most leaders. I've been saying that forever. And it's true. I mean, look at Andrew Cuomo, look at Ellen DeGeneres, look at, all these people who they allowed bad behavior. And there is no room for bad behavior anymore in all of this as a foundation.
That's right.
Right?
Fish shots from the head.
It does. It does. So that to me is another part of this whole equation. We're talking about people. First and foremost, that's what the business only gets done by virtue of the people who are sitting in the chairs. Yep. And if you don't have processes and considerations in place for those people, then as you say, your foundation is cracked.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. So we talked about mental health and consciousness. We talked about being decisive. I'd love for us to transition into our third topic, Jenny. Or a third must-have for leaders. And this is one where I consider you a master, and I know you've done some previous episodes around storytelling, building your narrative, communication. Talk to us about how essential communicating with care is for leaders as we move forward.
Well, what often comes to mind for me is that quick example that I just gave in this conversation about feedback. That to me is I know I'm kind of starting there, but it's because it's so important.
Yeah.
And if you can't, again, if you've got this mindset of fear of conflict and not being able to connect first with yourself and then to connect with other people, then the communication is broken down. And I just I'm concerned because, the linguist in me, I love words. I love the etymology of words. I love all these things, but I think we have lost the art of communicating both in writing and in written form. We're very sloppy. We make assumptions. Even I'm that purist who's like, don't ever send me an email in all lowercase or all uppercase. I mean, let's not be so sloppy and lazy that you can't hit that shift button to capitalize a letter at the beginning of a sentence. I mean, come on, have some honor for a system.
No, Jenny, that's a shared pet peeve. How many times have I said to you, is this person E.E. Cummings? Who is this? That is a shared pet peeve.
That's right. Yeah, I can't stand that. So there's precision in how you should speak, right? And the whole art of storytelling to me is so important. And I go back to Daniel Pink's book that I think came out in 2005 or 2006 called A Whole New Mind, where he talks about storytelling as as being this incredibly important art. That was part of the narrative. We talked about that. And I think that's really important as people learn to talk about themselves and when they're communicating with other people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
and to your point, to what we said, I know I was only half jesting about this being a pet peeve. But it also, effective communication is a signal of respect for your audience, right? The time and care for something as simple as hitting the shift button. It says something. It communicates something to your audience.
I agree.
So I think you're so spot on here. I think it's so critical. And I think too often, especially, I think too often we're dismissive of it.
And I think we're forgiving.
As a functional practice, is something that's often, unfortunately, not given the credence and weight that it should in how organizations operate effectively. Our people right now are seeking signs and signals. In the absence, again, of certainty and information, employees will fill in the blanks, and they'll usually fill in the blanks with worst case scenarios. So, not communicating effectively just drives further fear, uncertainty, anxiety, and counterproductive ways of being. And frankly, it's disrespectful.
It is.
So I think there's one thing that I'd add, Jenny, to what you've highlighted. And again, this is so tied into the beat that you've been on around consciousness, and it ties right back to consciousness. In my view, this next generation of leaders must be able to assimilate multiple information streams and quickly pivot and adapt their message to the audience. Yeah. And you talked about this a little bit before, that, the cult of personality is dead. It is not a way for folks to lead anymore.
That's right.
One of the game changers we've been through over the past 2 years is that reading the room, though a very important competence, is no longer a reliable capability or competence, right? You can't read a room when half the room is on video camera and half those video cameras are off, and all you see is someone's avatar, right? Or a picture of their dog or what have you, right? So this means leaders have to listen, which you're a master at, have to listen more intently than ever before. And when I say listen, I mean it in that, I think you call it ear to the ground. Mm-hmm. I mean it in that ear to the ground way. Yeah. I mean it in a conscious and tuned in way to what's going on in their world, in their community, in their business, in their teams. And they have to receive and process and assimilate that into a continually evolving and dynamic communication strategy. Winging it off a vibe isn't going to cut it. It's just not. No,
you're right, and I love that ear to the ground reference. It is something that I've been told that I have, and it's interesting because it's not an active effort. Yeah. It's people come to me and tell me things because I'm proud to say I've engendered trust. And people are willing to communicate some of their facts, yes, and feelings, sentiments, fears. And that informs, that forms this sphere of information that I'm now using to formulate a decision on a particular topic. Yes. It could be solely about that person and where should I move them to, or what experiences might I offer that might help them grow and develop even during this time. Or what does this mean for the rest of the team? Because they might be one of those people that is kind of representing the sentiments on behalf of an entire team. But if you're not attuned to that, if you can't get out of your own way enough as a leader and your own problems, your own neuroses, narcissism, whatever it might be, then you're not even going to hear it. You're tone deaf.
That's right. Spot on. It's the I am the mountain, come to the mountain approach of leadership. It's not doable these days.
Yeah, we've seen some of those venerable leaders fall flat on their faces of late, have we not?
We have.
Yeah.
We have. I think, to put a button on this, on the communication piece, the other piece that I think you're pulling on here, which is so tied to consciousness, as well, and so tied to how we started this conversation around if you're not well, If mommy ain't happy, ain't nobody happy, right? If you're not well, how are you taking care of everybody else? Is that authenticity piece, right? If you're not attuned, if you're not conscious of what's going on around you and within you, how are you going to show up in an authentic, meaningful way? And people are incredibly attuned to this right now, more so than I've ever seen, right? I know we're not here to get political, and I don't intend to, but look, we're in a post-Trump world. We are deeply attuned more so than ever to what bullshit looks like. I'm just going to say it. And we're also in an eat the rich moment. And so being attuned to how and what you communicate, especially to the junior most members of your organization, who constitute, for most organizations, the largest employee population, being attuned to what resonates with them is critical. So don't say to your team, I'm calling in from my house in the Hamptons. I'm calling in from my house in Tahoe. Oh, I'm on a party boat in the middle of a pandemic. Don't say it. You will be talked about and you will be judged by them. I hate to say it, but it's a fact. So just...
And it's a fact. And I come on. Yeah. That's that tone deafness.
It's a tone deaf.
Not good enough. Not good enough. And oh, by the way, I mean, I hadn't thought about this so much before, but I guess I kind of lived it when I was at Google. You know, I'm of a certain age, and the average age there was 30 something. Maybe it still is 30, 32. And that's the wave. That's who is coming up as, you know, becoming managers and starting to be leaders.
These are
our leaders. And you know what? For someone like me, I recognize, and I think they've got a certain level of humility in some cases to acknowledge they don't know what they don't know, because these young people don't have the benefit of wisdom. Boomers like me are pulling out. So I'm hoping that we can create some bridges. It's one of the reasons I'm doing this entrepreneur in residence thing that I mentioned, so that I can make myself available to young founders and say, this is what I've witnessed and lived, and let me offer it to you for the benefit so you don't have to go through some of those things. But there's got to be that level of humility. And the fact that you were an A student, now I'm combining a whole bunch of different themes here that we touched on. The fact that you were this A student doesn't mean that you're going to be a great leader, right? Or that you have this domain expertise. It doesn't necessarily mean that. And so you have to acknowledge and have the self-awareness to know where you need help and ask for it.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, it's that apprenticeship, the value of apprenticeship, which we unfortunately, seem to have lost in so many domains and in so many business models, even some that were, founded or predicated on the apprenticeship model of development training. And I think that's become even more challenging in this virtual environment, right? Where people are not even, and let me be clear, well, I love our offices at Google, and I'm going to be thrilled to be back when it happens. I'm not rushing back there. But I do think we've lost a lot of that, the value of being in the same space. And even just, I think about our work in recruiting, even just the value of, having to overhear how someone positions something and frames a conversation and, works through a challenging scenario. We've lost a lot of that in our time.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Well, Jackson, should we tie this one up for now with these three? Do you want to summarize?
I think that makes sense.
Good at that.
Sure. So, we got to always leave them wanting more, Jenny. Today we talked about on fifth dimensional leadership, we are focused on what are those essential ingredients for leaders to be able to lead us through and beyond this time that we've all been in for the past 2 years. Mm-hmm. We talked about leading with mental health and consciousness, so critical to leadership success across multiple dimensions. We talked about being decisive and really meeting the moment with effective, impactful leadership that makes people feel comfortable, confident, and safe at work, and gives them, the courage to keep showing up and acknowledging leaders, if you're not providing that stable, safe, confident work environment, that your employees have options right now and will seek out environments that will provide that. And finally, communicating with care, communicating in a way that's authentic, honest, thoughtful, intuitive, and tied into the consciousness of the world, your community, your teams, and your business. So, Jenny, always a great conversation. We have 2 more. We promised 5, right? We did 3. These last big ones. Ones. So I encourage everybody to tune in to our next episode, Jenny. And do you want to take us out?
Yeah, well, I just want to thank you, Jackson. First of all, it really is so wonderful to be reconnected after all that we've been through in our respective moves and major transitions in the midst of the pandemic. And I love having that partner and that friend that we just got this bond that just always, it withstands whatever. And I actually think it's done so much to enrich our collective insight and wisdom on this subject of the future of work, because I think we both now we've been able to kind of step back a little bit. We've been in the fray, but at the same time, we're able to kind of step back and say, I can see what's maybe on the horizon over there, So I love your thought leadership. And together, I think we're offering some things that are going to be really timely and that I hope people will take seriously for themselves and for the teams that they are going to be leading. And I say teams, it could be groups that they are influencing. This isn't about direct reports, but you're referring to athletes as an example. Those are leaders. You guys are making changes in big ways. And so I want all of you to be healthy and confident and secure and deliberate and empowered, knowing that this is your time for a big change. It starts with you. And we're here to help you. We're here to love on you and support you as we move into this new phase of our civilization. So holding hands, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks with our next episode where we go deeper into the future of work. So thanks, everybody. We'll see you soon. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy Fifth Dimensional Leadership, subscribe, share, and leave a rating or review on your platform of choice. And don't forget to check us out at ginnyclarke.com. That's GINNYCLARKE.com. You can explore this and prior episodes, view tips and tricks, and sign up for special announcements. We'll see you back here in 2 weeks. And until then, remember, you're just that good. Special thanks to writer and collaborator Jackson Best, contributors Sadasia McCutcheon and Tianka Shepard, operations manager Kimberly Cupits, and production and editing Podfly Productions.